I was sitting here, and my wife, Sue, was sitting here. Danny was in his bedroom down the hallway over here, and he came out of his bedroom and said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, can you guys close your eyes? I have a surprise for you."
What's going on?
I don't know what happened. I just came over to my parents' house because we were going to watch the game, and my mom is shot, and my dad is shot, my brother's here.
Does anybody know what happened? Did your brother shoot your parents?
I don't know what this is. My brother said, "Don't come in, don't come in."
We all have disagreements within our family, be it over trivial things like what to watch on TV, or more serious issues like finances and partners. But when stubborn child Daniel Petrick clashed with his parents over a copy of Halo 3, their battle would end in the most unthinkable of ways, leaving one dead and another fighting for their life. Daniel's story would not stop there either. Outrage aside, it was the next case to spark nationwide debate over the video game industry, and further question the notion of violence for entertainment. But who was Daniel Petrick? What actions did he take against his parents? And what was the aftermath? You know, I used to play a lot of video games while growing up. Things like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, Battlefield, back when the series was good, and even GTA. To say that gaming was a large part of my life while growing up is quite an understatement. I made many friends who I still know today, learned a fair few things, and had a lot of fun. However, there is a very fine balance when it comes to video games, and that's a balance that parents have to decide for their own children. But who knew that it could end in murder? Before we begin, and just to let you know that I post true crime and strange cases here weekly, so if that does sound like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help me out. It's here in the leafy neighborhoods of Wellington that we find the Petrick family. Susan Petrick, aged 43, and her husband Mark were the proud parents of their two daughters, Heidi and Holly, and of course their son Daniel. The Petricks were a typical suburban family. Susan and Mark had been married for around 23 years. Focusing on Susan, she was born and raised in Cheverly, Maryland, and it was after attending Valley Forge Christian College in Pennsylvania that she met and fell in love with Mark. At the time that this story takes place, Susan was happily working in Weber's Healthcare, a nursing home found within Wellington, whereas for Mark, he was a Pentecostal minister at the New Life Assembly of God. As a result, all three children were raised in a Christian household. They were all described as having a good relationship with their parents, and the family home was about as peaceful as a family of 5 could get. Focusing on our main character of the story today, Daniel Petrick was a 16-year-old kid who fit the American standard. Born on August 24th, 1991, he was 16 years old at the time this story took place. Growing up, his friends and family described him as a normal and happy teenager, fun to be around and friendly to talk to. To add to this, he also appeared to be very enthusiastic about the Bible in his younger teen years, and remained out of trouble while at school too. And although he may not have been the brightest crayon in the box, he certainly was not the most dull either, and was able to consistently achieve average to good school grades. Being a teenager growing up in a small American town, it is no surprise that Daniel found quite a large interest in video games, and unfortunately, after a spinal injury, this interest would continue to grow. After contracting a spinal injury during a skiing holiday, Daniel was housebound for more than an entire year. As a result, the TV became his best friend, and eventually, the Xbox did too. But herein lies the problem, because although Mark didn't mind video games, he despised violent ones, and that's when Daniel started to take an interest. You see, at the time, in the year 2007, parents were not too sure what to think about violent video games. The realism was relatively new, and they didn't know how it would affect their children. Actually, even I faced this issue. I was 15 years old at the time, and my mom was not comfortable with the game GTA. In fact, it was banned in the family house, and so I snuck around a friend's house to play it instead. You know, at the time, it really aggravated me, but I guess in hindsight, I fully understand why she was uncomfortable. So, I guess, Mom, I'm sorry. Anyway, this was when Daniel and his friends all found an interest in Halo 3, and back in the patriarch household, that's when tension began to grow. For those of you who don't know, Halo is a first-person shooter that puts you in the shoes of Master Chief, an enhanced super soldier that must fight aliens and parasites. Halo was massively popular back in the day and still has a very loyal fan base. It was the best-selling game of 2007 and even still today is considered to be one of the most influential FPS games of all time. So, it's kind of obvious why a 16-year-old would love to play this game, and especially if all of his friends were playing it too. But Daniel's gaming habits remained unchecked, and he would more than 8 hours of video games every single day. And when his father banned Halo 3 from the household, he would simply go over to his friend's house instead. And as you can likely imagine, as the consequences against Daniel increased, so did his reaction against them. Tensions really began to build in October 2007, and it all started when Daniel asked his father if he could buy him a copy of Halo 3. The answer was of course no, which provoked a tantrum from the teenager. Mark remanded that his son was to stop playing all violent video games. The man was very closely aligned with his Christian beliefs and thought that these games were bad for Daniel's mind. He therefore gave his son an ultimatum: stop playing Halo 3 or move out of the house. Daniel, being the short-sighted teenager, picked the latter, moving in with a friend for several days, as they played games for up to 18 hours a day. However, when his friend's parents grew concerned, they requested that Daniel move back home. Naturally, this did nothing to fix the tension between father and son. Mark's boundaries remained very clear, but Daniel was ready to test them. After sneaking out of his bedroom window, Daniel traveled to his local GameStop to buy himself a copy of Halo 3. However, after bringing it home and sneakily trying to play it, his father caught him in the act, and as expected, a huge argument broke out between him and his parents. Confiscating it off of him, Mark placed the game inside the family safe, storing it next to his Taurus .92 handgun. Both of these things were inaccessible without the safe's key, which Mark kept in his own secret location. And with both objects strictly out of access for the troubled teenager, Mark hoped that the issue would settle down in the coming days. But unfortunately for him, and even more unfortunately for his wife, these hopes would be dashed in the most horrific of ways. October 20th, 2007 started like any other weekend. It was a Saturday, and the Pietrek family were enjoying their time off. Their older daughter, Heidi, was expected to come home later that evening, where they would all watch baseball together. As the evening approached, Daniel walked into the family living room to talk to his parents, and with a tone of excitement in his voice, he asked them to close their eyes. "I have a surprise for you," he said. Mark and Susan were rather shocked by this. Daniel had spent the last few days in a very foul sulk. However, he now appeared to be positive and in an apparently giving mood. Curious to know what his surprise was, they both closed their eyes while remaining seated on the sofa. And with their eyes closed, Mark could hear Daniel walk behind him. With bated breath, he waited with anticipation as to what his son could be up to. But that was when he heard the all-too-familiar metallic click.
And I was sitting here, and my wife, Sue, was sitting here. Danny was in his bedroom down the hallway over here, and he came out of his bedroom, said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, can you guys close your eyes? I have a surprise for you." And I didn't know he already had my 9mm handgun, and he just put it against the side of my head here. I was sitting here, kind of laid back, and he put it right here and shot me.
In one of the most devious plots ever, Daniel had tricked his parents into lowering their guard. There was no surprise waiting for them. And now, with Mark's eyes closed, Daniel cocked the gun to the back of his head. In a feeble attempt to recover his game, Daniel had spent the last few days trying to find the key to the safe. And now that he'd opened it, he found the gun next to his copy of Halo 3. It was then, armed with his father's handgun, that Daniel stepped into the of irreversible actions. He shot his father once in the head, before firing 4 rounds at his mother. The bullet to Mark's head had incredibly not killed him, but he was only a hair's breadth from death. As for his mother, she had unfortunately died, making Daniel a cold-blooded killer. It was at that moment that, out of sheer coincidence, Daniel's sister had just returned home with her husband. Hearing the commotion inside, she ran in and found a horrific sight. But Daniel was not done yet. In the next shocking twist, Daniel pointed the gun at her, threatening her not to call the police. As Daniel made his getaway in the family van, Heidi rushed to her father's aid, and after fighting for his life, Daniel's dad was able to recall what happened before finally passing out. With his last breath, he requested that his daughter forgive Daniel before being rushed to the hospital. Heidi called the police, who began searching for Daniel. In the midst of his getaway, he realized what he had done and decided to end it all. And he was about to pull the trigger on himself when he got pulled over by the police. Daniel was immediately taken into custody. This is where things take a bit of a weird turn. After being arrested, Daniel pleaded not guilty to all charges of murder, attempted murder, and aggravated assault. You see, although he had indeed killed his mother and almost killed his father, he was under the influence of temporary insanity caused by the addiction to video games.
For children, and for teenagers especially, in those teen years, the level of addiction is stronger than a heroin or a cocaine addiction. One of the bullets hit here, and the other bullet went out here.
You can see why this would be controversial, and the judge overseeing the case had to consider Daniel's age and how he was potentially unaware of the consequences of his actions. During the trial, Mark miraculously made a full recovery and testified in favor of his son. You see, despite everything that had happened, he had forgiven him and was concerned that his son would face life behind bars. Mark requested a lighter sentence for his son.
So I'm asking the court on Danny's behalf for a lenient sentence. Because Danny does have remorse and regret. And I believe God is a God of forgiveness and a God of second chances. Although God does not remove consequences, he doesn't. But he does give second chances, and I'm asking.
But after considering the heinous crime that had taken place, the judge sentenced him to 23 years to life. It would take several years for Daniel to process the damage he had done, but after coming to terms with the actions, he gave several interviews in which he stated that he was regretful for what he did. This case will forever be ingrained in the memories of many, and again highlights the dangers that addiction can pose. Daniel Petrick is eligible for parole in 2030, when he will be 39 years old. But do you think that he was in the right mind when he committed the crime? Please, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching another video today.